Um, you know, I wanted to talk a little bit. No one really has the breadth of knowledge that I have. A lot of people have more depth of knowledge and things, but I have breadth and some depth of knowledge. And I'm a jack of all, master of none type thing. But I'm a jack of many and a master of few. I put it that way because compare what is mastery? Mastery, I would say, is the ability to create new knowledge in a field. That's like technically, academically, what knowledge is, or what mastery is. And I am able to do that, to innovate things, even if it already exists somewhere. I can make something that's an innovation for my own purposes that I didn't know existed already. I can do that with yogic practices and changing my health and stuff. And I cough a lot, and there's some psychic element to that, but in general, I've changed my health. I've been able to change my habits and make it stick. Be in that mentality of always being very changeable. So I do have some level of mastery over some things, and also, sort of my semi-chaos magic-y, more jazzy, way of doing ceremonial magic. It's not even really ceremonial magic. It is. It's what it is. A truncated ceremonial magic. It's not exactly chaos magic, but it's also not full-on ceremonial magic. It's ceremonial magic without all the pomp and ceremony. Although I treat it with pomp and ceremony, I just don't do all the pomp and ceremony. And because my consciousness is like sort of prizing the little things, it becomes very direct magical process. So. There's a lot of things to be said there. There's different perspectives that are also kind of true at the same time. Like, a lot of times, especially magic is one of those things where there's a lot of things operating at the same time. And I genuinely believe that, in some past life I was, an alien on some other world doing some higher thing. Basically an angel. This idea that we were angels, we incarnated into human bodies. And then here we are, many lifetimes later. And I don't feel like embarrassed about that or like it's something I need to hide, just on the surface of what it is. But I think that, especially with the Starseed community, and it's like we're telling people, oh, hey, you're special because you used to be an alien, whereas, probably something like 30% of the population of the Earth or more had some extraterrestrial origin. I mean, I personally believe that the reason we have different races is because literally they're from different planets. And the different planets colonized the Earth and then left, and then are kind of watching from a distance, like, ooh, what's gonna happen? Let's mash a bunch of random shit together and see what happens. For the fun of it, almost. And that makes Earth an experiment ground. I think it's more than that. I think there's a lot of layers to what is happening here on the Earth. But, yeah, that's what I think. And I think I'm glad I've said it that way now, because sometimes it can just be so hard to just say it and to just make it clear. And I think that's as clear as I can get it, because some Christian theologies have the idea that we are going to become angels when we die. Perhaps a very high class of angels. because it says we'll be above the angels in the Bible. So what does that mean exactly? It's very interesting. Also in cartoons, you can see how people turn into angels. I believe that comes from some medieval theology. I don't I don't remember exactly, but I remember reading something like that. So I think to turn it around and said we are angels and we will be again is sort of purifying of the whole, starseed, aliens and things in space type situation. I think also if you believe that aliens are demons, well, okay, if you believe that some local other beings are coming and are going to put on like some sort of play, then it's like, oh well, it's about something very specific. But I mean, it just depends. I think we have to think that there's other beings out there that let's say quote unquote God's creation unquote is quote God's creation unquote is infinite. Then how can we be the only intelligent beings? Maybe we're the only beings in the under the scope of the Bible, but how can we think that we're the only ones? So yeah, that's my take on it. I think it's really dangerous to tell people, oh, you were living like the plot of Star Wars or Avatar right out the gate, because I think people really focus on the wrong things here. Like, I think it's cool to think about that sort of thing a little bit. Perhaps it trickles through some of the stories that I'm, plotting out and doing work on. I have a lot of material written down, things I've already written down a long time ago. I suppose that probably past life memory or me channeling some memory in the collective or something comes through, and I believe that has come through all kinds of fantasy and sci-fi literature and productions. And I think that I think it's cool, and I think it should be talked about. Or I think art though is kind of the perfect place for this particular spiritual experience. This remembering, because I can go all day and say, oh, I was a prince of some alien collective in this life, and I was like some kind of like Spartan bee person in this life, and I was a cat person in that life, and oh my god, all these fabulous things I've done. But plenty of people have, we've all been a lot of things throughout our lifetimes. And I think sometimes people aren't remembering their lifetime as much as, maybe they're close to some person of note and they're remembering that. Like, there's a lot of people that think that they were certain great historical figures in past lives. Like, I can think of, I'm pretty sure in recent years there's been two different like streamers or influencers sort of who said that they were they're a certain German painter, and yeah, it's just, I don't know, obviously, like, so in guitar there's a concept that one soul can split into, and the next incarnation it can split into more persons. So guitar has to fight these three demon lords, who then further split themselves, fragment themselves into, one turns into three brothers, one turns into two brothers, and I think it was three that turned into like 6 or 7 or something, 7, 8, I don't know. I remember thinking it was strange because it was a lot of demons turning into a whole ton of people. And perhaps that can happen. I think that's a more demonic thing, but yeah, I think like through hypnosis, I don't think we always see what's in our past. We can sometimes see something that is just it's sort of recorded in our energy body, even if it wasn't exactly us, because I don't know. I guess some of us are connected to each other, like soul family, things of that nature. Maybe you're really impressed by something that happened on the other side of the world, and you know that, or sometimes something happens secretly, but the energy of it spills out, like the whole satanic panic. Now I found out all that was true, but I don't think it happened to the lady that wrote the book, because it was proven that it didn't happen to the lady that wrote the book. Unless we go full on, they use time machines on everyone. I think the simpler explanation, I'm not a big fan of Occam's razor, but okay, I'll use it in this case. I think it's simpler to simply say, what if some people are suffering and that's putting out some vibes, and she caught on to it through hypnosis, because the subconscious, even Jung talks about this collective unconscious, perhaps hypnosis makes someone the voice of that, in a way. So, and then it comes to the question of maybe let's say Star Wars or something had such an effect on people subconsciously of what they might be, of where things could go, of what could be found out in the cosmos. It's made an impression on people that hypnosis is then just sort of revealing, rather than it being like a genuine past life. That's a little more like in the realm of speculation. I think some of the stuff really, there's some common threads that even I've had experiences. But like, for example, I had an experience of a plane of purple fog that I had. It really kind of traumatized me. Like, I was releasing tension from my face, and I was really going into a trance to dig in. I found that I was releasing tension from past lives, and I went back, and I was in some old Earth culture, and then like Atlantis era, whatever, basically prehistory, or like legendary times, or even before that. And then after that trauma came out of just the space, like between my eyes, like at sort of the bridge of the nose. I think it's the bridge of the nose it's called. And then I released that, and then I got another memory that was before Earth, and there's this plane of purple fog, and there's mountains all around it. It was more like so there was a plane, but then there was mountains like interspersed. So I guess it was more of a saddle of purple fog. The plane of purple fog sounds cooler. But I was telling a friend about this, and he said, "Oh, I remember that." And I just said it offhandedly. I wasn't thinking anything of it. I barely remembered it. Well, I didn't remember much about it, and yeah, I don't spend a lot of time on that stuff, because I think delving through past life memories can just be this endless phantasmagoria that like doesn't really have much of a point to it. I know enough about my past lives to have a sense of multi-lifetime purpose from it, but also I don't have to do the same thing I did last time, or but I can get a sense of, okay, this is kind of who I am ultimately, and I can just keep, there's a trajectory that I might as well keep, kind of thing. So, like for example, I believe that, I feel a strong connection to the Arcturians. I believe I was one at one point, and I have a friend who also has that feeling, and even our inner thoughts that we've talked about are so similar. Like, and it's not just like I'll say a bunch of things and you'll say, yeah, ditto. It's more like I'll say something and you'll be like, whoa, and then I feel and think the same way, and then he'll expand upon it, and it's like, yeah, it's the same thing I was thinking. Or he'll bring up something completely out of the blue, and I'll be like, oh wow, that's something that I think about. And like our life circumstances are pretty similar. It's really, really interesting.
Who can still there are few of us who with devout kisses we bless time outside.
And maybe there's something else going on there. I will say I feel there's something wrong with the whole starseed thing, and I think it acts as a trap so that people are interested in the phantasmagoria. Ooh, I was something in the past. Ooh, I'm this special thing. And worse than that, I think a lot of people have just become like super space Christians, and they have a mission and they're sacrificing themselves, so it sort of makes them Jesus. To me, and everyone's got to start somewhere, but I think you necessarily on these paths you have to unhinge yourself from what came before. But I guess I wanted to interlace this. I wanted to talk a lot about the starseed thing because it's a bit problematic, even though I believe it's true. But besides that, there's so many areas of things. There's so many dimensions to us. Like I do yogic stuff. This is what I was talking about at the beginning, and this is where I wanted to go with it. There's many dimensions, and I think knowing more of them can be really helpful, and it can help you cut through the sort of the narcissism of like, oh, my way of seeing things is better. Like, oh, I know I'm an alien, so go suck it. Like, yeah, which people who are real deal starseeds that have some of the really high octane experiences, like. Some will have the benefits of, what a normal, vanilla Earth soul, I guess, might spend lifetimes, becoming good at some esoteric thing, some esoteric practice. Some of these recent starseeds, like even that I've met, can do things that are just, I don't know if like regular, let's say, human would ever get there. Like, and some of these experiences can be fleeting, but I think in the world we sort of have, yeah, I'm getting blocked from saying this. Okay, well, I'm being told not to say it, so if I say it, I'll cause myself some issue with, some spirits or something. Yeah, so back to my point about, so there's yogic things, there's ceremonial magic things, there's deity work with different, let's say, high angels. I'm just gonna say, like, okay, with one thing, I feel like, sometimes I feel like building bridges with Christianity, and sometimes I feel like really attacking Christianity, and I think there's value to both, and I do both to some extent. I mean, probably me throwing stones just pisses people off, and probably me making some post or video as if building bridges just feels disingenuous. But yeah, it's not. It's there's a method to my madness, and the point is, I think Christianity has evolved and and left a lot of really key things behind. First of all, like, if this existence is about consciousness and the world of dreams and the astral plane and the spiritual world where we fight this spiritual war, if that's real and this is just a projection, this is just the matter, and we need to have some small disdain for the matter towards the spiritual. We need to despise the material in favor of the spiritual, and not totally despise it, but in the sense that we know that it's an illusion, right? Well, if that's true, then if I make a spell, I'm merely declaring an intention. and if I write the names of 30 deities, really you can just see that's angels. Deities are angels. Archangel Michael is like Indra or something, or maybe Gabriel's Indra. But there are these connections. Maybe angels are a different class than, you know, like the classical angels, as it were, a different class than deities. But at the same time, the deities are deputized beings who control certain facets of the universe. So yeah, you know, it's not all black and white. And yeah, if someone quote unquote worships angels, like puts angels above divine consciousness, or conflates them with divine consciousness, that is to some extent problematic. But I think that okay, someone is working with, you know, Archangel Michael or whatever being. Well, these beings exist, don't they? If they are operating in the world, I mean, Daniel, I think it was Michael. Was it Michael or Gabriel that went to talk to Daniel? I think it was Gabriel, actually. But he got blocked by the Prince of Persia. Well, what's happening is Daniel is... Okay, maybe from that story you could assume that Daniel is just... He was supposed to receive a message from God and didn't, and maybe it was revealed to him that this thing was happening and he wrote it down. Or what I think is that Daniel was a magician and he was working with Archangel Gabriel, and Gabriel basically got blocked and he was like, oh shit. And then if you look at the prophets and such as magicians, their stories make way more sense, and you kind of realize that basically all along the Jews were doing all of this magic to kind of survive and slink along and slip through the cracks and things like that. I mean, talking about the Jews, it's very, very complicated, and I think also they ended up being a spoil of war to the Babylonians and the Persians, because they just have certain... I think, you know, Jews have certain capacities that a lot of other people just don't. Like it says in the Talmud that the Goy are like dogs compared to the Jews, and I think in some ways that's true, in the sense that many Jews are they're a more advanced form of life, and I don't think that makes them above all other races, but I think they're right to prize themselves to some extent. I don't think, you know, it justifies genocide or things like that, but in general I think there's something to it. You know, and I think it's more in general. It's more of a it's more metaphorical. But like I said, I think there's something to it. So, you know, it's not really vital to look at it and be like, oh, the Jews are, or sorry, it's not vital to look at it and be like, angels are evil, magic's evil, we should all just be like, la la la, come save me, God, I trust God for everything. It's kind of saying that working with, you know, deities and angels and magic, saying that that's wrong and that you should just trust in God. As a magician, as someone who can manifest things, can, you know, see things, can see the future, can do all these things. Most of these things they're arts and sciences. It's not, you know, oh, it's this, I've got to make a contract with... Beings can help you get further faster, and so that can be, you know, but this idea of, selling your soul, I mean, you change yourself, you know, there's always a transformation that's going to happen when you gain new skills. I mean, you know, people go and work in insurance or sales or human resources or any you know, and that changes you. Magic is the same, and it's more so because it's a more intrinsic thing. It's consciousness itself. It's the study of consciousness itself. It's deeper than philosophy, actually. Or basically, it's very close to philosophy. It's very close to art, but it's much more manipulative of those sorts of currents. But it's in that realm of, like, magic and philosophy and arts are, like, all very close together. Religion is actually a little bit further away because it's a little more tends to be dogmatic, the way people do religion. But, you know, some religions are a little more artsy. I just don't want I want to be very clear on this point, as clear as I can be. And, you know, if still someone doesn't understand it, it's just those who have ears to hear type of thing. If you know, you know type of thing, perhaps. But you know, it kind of, when people are saying, oh, that spells and working with angels and deities is like somehow moral and compromising of the soul, it's like, it's kind of like the joke where the guy prays for salvation, but then people come to save him, and he says, no, I'm waiting for God. And then God finally tells him, I sent these 2-3 people to help you. Why didn't you know? I'm trying to help you through the people. I, God, am not going to come down and save you personally. It's a metaphor, you know. I mean, not to say necessarily the person of God is a metaphor, or, you know, I suppose sometimes angels descend and just save people or something like that. But in general, why does someone need that? You know what I mean? It's a lot of these things are subtle and obtuse. And the more I think you can say yes to the subtlety, you can say yes to this steep complexity of it, the steep sort of the steep abstraction of it. The more you can say yes to that, the more you're gonna find the power in magic and the power in the little things, and that's where some really dynamite magic is, where some really dynamite power is. And you know, spells and working with deities and stuff is just, it's an intermediary, but it's an intermediary for a material result. And you can say, like, oh, but if you're like a Christian, then you only want the spiritual gain. You don't care if you're even a hobo on the street. But does anyone really believe that? How many times do you go to church and people are getting each other jobs and people are relatively affluent? Oh, God has blessed me so much this year with money. Well, if money and material things don't matter, then how is it a blessing? It should be a nothing. It should be just a random thing that's happened. Isn't thanking God for the money actually, you know? So I think people have the wrong idea about it. There's on one hand this idea of, oh yes, if I'm a good Christian, God will bless me with the things I need. But the things people imagine they need is actually, to some extent, linked with, like, their vanity, because, you know, people are living enormously excessive lives and have no clue. So, you know, it's not really, it doesn't work. It's like, is someone getting rewarded with their affluence for serving God, which is kind of a works-based thing, or for having that humility and that devotional love for God? Why would God give you money if you're already getting riches in heaven? So this is where I think that I don't think that what Jesus said or the Bible is breaking down in this situation. I think people are overemphasizing this aesthetic Christianity that I think never his only exists in the imaginations of Protestants. Well, I mean, of course now it's a huge reality, but I don't think that was, I don't think that the text forces you to think that way. I think Jesus says a lot of radical things to paint a picture. I don't think he's saying, okay, everyone needs to be a hobo preaching like crazy about the gospel. And so I think there's this sort of, almost, there's that current though still in Christianity. Like, there are hobos that'll be screaming about the end of the world and stuff. And from a point of view, I can see why they're doing that. You know what I mean? And you know, it can be hard to stick with your faith when you go through hard things and whatnot. So I commend people who go through hard things and stick with their faith. But yeah, I don't. I think that if you're strong in the Lord, that yeah, you'll see the money. And why will you see the money? Because the money is a picture of something spiritual. And, you know, there's lots of pictures of spiritual things. Having a good spouse, having good children, having good traits, you know, not being troubled by too many excessive anxiety. Some people just have a disposition of anxiety. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking, you know, or disposition for depression or things like that. I'm talking about the excessive, like, wow, you're in a bad place, you know. And if people serve the Lord, they won't have that. Even me, when I left Christianity and went on to basically bigger and better things, in my opinion, you know, bigger and better things in Protestantism. I still never really lost that feeling of
sister of mine, as I foretold,
you know, I had a dark night of the soul where I went like
the forbidden
gate.
Gate.
More agnostic, and that was hard. By studying magic, and magic kind of gave me something, because I wanted to ask the question: is God real? Because there has to be more to this than the Bible's telling me. Well, actually, the Bible has it all, but it's really a steep learning curve, and it's not something I could have reasonably discovered for myself without looking to Eastern texts to help me understand the Western texts. And Kabbalah, of course, also open because I already knew a lot of the material from Eastern texts. So, and I mean, I'm not even that much into Kabbalah because I hardly need a lot of the information. There's a few rabbis I really enjoy listening to, but you know, lots of complex stuff. Anyways, so, you know, and that feeling, I think that feeling of certainty, that feeling of God's got you, that I've really just never lost. You know, that's something you really can't buy. And I think a lot of materialistic people that don't have, like, quote unquote, a connection to God, that's something that they're going to do all kinds of things to try and hedge themselves to feel secure, to feel like they're living with purpose. And I think most quote-unquote atheists are actually more theistic actually than they're recreating the wheel. Atheism becomes religion within itself in some other way, I think, a lot of the time. Kind of a guess. I know some people that are hardcore atheists. I know some people who are quote-unquote atheists but are still into spirituality. I've met a lot of people like the latter, though, or people that are supposedly they're atheists, but actually they're agnostics. I think saying atheist gets people off your back, because if you're an agnostic, then people want you to like be a Christian, because like you're half Christian already, or they think that you're an easy mark to get into some cult or something. Yeah. So actually, I have a lot of respect for a lot of people I know who are big on, I'm an atheist. So, you know, I also think that, like, being in church and people are like, sometimes I doubt if there's a God. Well, maybe we can say, well, the jury's out. I don't know if there's a God. You know, I think there's honesty to that as well. And that's just me respecting other people, you know what I mean? And I think having empathy and understanding for others, I don't know, it feels Christ-like to me. I mean, Christ also flipped the tables and could be kind of an asshole to people he, I guess, felt deserved it. I don't know. That's one thing. The tension between Paul and Jesus is interesting. I forget if it's Paul or Peter though that said, "Let your speech be seasoned with salt," laying down every good word or something like that. It's been a while since I've read it, but and meanwhile Jesus is like, "No one may follow me who buries their father." Jesus, you know? Holy crap, man. You know, so there's some variance, there's some like variability and all of that. I think especially in the Protestant faith there becomes a little bit too much of, there's one monolithic image, and as long as people pay their homage to that image of what Christ was saying or what the dogma is, and then they go home and they live their life, like, then they're kind of good. And yeah, I think that Protestantism is more about a social thing, and then it's more a social contract than, you know, proper religion and so, you know, that's some of my gripe with it. But yeah, religion in general. I also have gripes with Vaishnavism. I don't even just mean ISKCON. I think Vaishnavism has a little bit too much this idea that we're gonna die and go to this transcendental place, which actually a lot of Shaivism has this too, where, oh, we're gonna die and we're gonna go to Shiva Loka and, you know, fuck this place, basically. This theme of okay, we're gonna die and then we're gonna go off to, I think this idea of we're gonna die and we're gonna go off to some place somewhere in the ether, we're gonna be energetic beings somewhere, we're gonna be energetic beings, we're gonna be praising the Lord all the time, or being very filled with divine light in one way or another, and we're just gonna be transcendentally happy. And basically, here's the part that really bothers me about all of the, you know, basically heaven concepts, is they're all inert. You know, you go to heaven, you have, you know, what is it 90 versions in Islam, and then you spend your afterlife copulating endlessly, and it's like, oh, so, but what happens after that? I personally don't think there's an end destination, especially going back to the starseed stuff. I think we just keep changing state and having different experiences and going to different places, and there's just different activities, and so, you know, maybe there is such a reality that we'll be in for some period of time, but then I think there's something after that even. So, and is it that
Behold,
the other thing is, when we're talking about hell, is that soul death? Are a lot of people's souls going to be actually destroyed? Why? And so what I'm saying is that we should think about the spiritual future in the same way that we think about the literal physical future, because actually then if we know that we are reincarnated again and again, then we can know that we're going to be there eventually, and it's not just game over, it's new game. It's a new game, you know what I mean? What is that new game? Interesting. So I'm not saying that necessarily these ideas are wrong or incorrect. I'm saying that it's like I'll give it a little more thought, you know, and I think it shouldn't become a psychological device of like, okay, I'm not going to take care of myself now because I'm going to get something later, you know what I mean? You know, I mean, one thing I think about when I think about this sort of thing is, and it really, my issue with the whole thing is sort of making a debt in the present, and, you know, sort of a spiritual debt even, that like you're putting God in debt. You're saying, okay, God, you're gonna give me something later, right? So, and then you give things that maybe God didn't ask from you. So I don't know. I think a lot of asceticism, I think, is pointless. I use asceticism as a tool. It's a particular tool. It's a tool I like to use. And there's a lot of people that I think are just making themselves suffer, and I don't know how good they really are at it. I think about what are they foreclosing on and why. You know, what desires and impulses are they foreclosing on? It's really disturbing. But one thought that comes to mind is I think it was Jesus that said, if you're faithful in a little, a servant who's faithful in a little, to them more will be given. Wouldn't this even be true, you know, that in our lives now, what we do will be multiplied in the next life, in the, you know, in heaven, as it were, if we're going to heaven eventually. And reincarnation is a capital F fact. It's as verified as anything spiritual can be, as any spiritual truth can be. The Kabbalist rabbis, reincarnation is a concept that comes up in Kabbalah. I think it's relatively accepted in that. The Eastern religions they take up a huge portion of the population of the earth. Hinduism and Buddhism and Jain and Sikh and all these things. Also, it looks a lot like the ancient Egyptian and Greek religions, especially the Egyptian religion believed in reincarnation. They're saying, oh, the afterlife is more important than the current life. No, I think that they are preparing for their next incarnation. In fact, Ramses II, his tomb, or his mummy, something like that, was moved by Suetonius II. And if I look at their faces and they look similar, I think perhaps Suetonius II was Ramses II reincarnated, moving his own body. A wild conspiracy theory, but I think this was the point, and that by aggrandizing themselves in death, they're making something for themselves in the future. Yeah. Also, if you look at some of the pagan ideas of like mother making circle of sort of the animistic circle of life type things. You know, looking at the Native Americans. A lot of these ideas, I think, lend reincarnation, even if they're not reincarnation on their face. You know, so to me, it's enough big traditions that take reincarnation seriously. Not to mention, you know, a lot of the powerful movers, government things. Like you can even look at Jews in the sciences and like in the World War II era and a bit after. Like you can read what's his name? It's one of the guys that worked on that Adam Bomb, I think. But I remember reading through his book and seeing just hints of all these sort of mystical things. And, you know, and also some of the things Einstein said sound very mystical. I mean, hermetics and quantum physics have overlap. Alright, continuing from the one before last. Returning from the intermission. Yeah, so my concept of the whole, you know, if you're faithful in a little, you'll be given more. My concept of this is that in life we're building spiritual resources, we're building spiritual... I don't want to use the word assets here, but it kind of fits metaphorically. You know, building up spiritual riches. they're building something non-physical through that. They're building something mental, or at least that's Plato's concept. Probably not everyone did it for that reason, but like Plato was a bodybuilder, but his reasoning for that was very philosophical, which philosophical and spiritual, or I would say philosophical is closer to spiritual than to engage in philosophy is closer to spirit than to engage in religion. So, you know, that's the thing. It is, in my mind, it's about living honestly, building yourself up in these ways, and it could be wealth, it could be physique, it could be mental notions. But see, this is where it becomes, I think, the more potent things, you know, such as mental notions that I just mentioned, or even money. If you have a lot of complex ways that you're getting money, you know, like if you're in some kind of complex corporate scenario, then you're a decision maker. You're just the karma of your decisions, the way you treat those people who are affected by you that are within, you know, your realm of influence, basically. You know, the people in the office that are under you, or, you know, are close colleagues, basically. I mean, not necessarily that you're friends with them even. You know, all of that has a value. But notions especially. This is where we start to get into magic, because, you know, my notions become a manifestation avenue for me, and your notions become a manifestation avenue for you. So, because notions are sort of mercurial by nature, coming up with a lot of notions, waxing philosophical as it were, you're going to have to grapple with that mental mercurial energy, and that's going to make it very hard to tell what you're actually building. So, in those scenarios, sometimes intention, you know, just think about your intention. There's kind of the code of what, and covenants of what you're actually, the words that you're saying, and then there's the way in which you say it, there's the spirit in which you say it, which will be encoded in the words. So, you know, there's systems now being followed where you can see the original spirit of it because it's still encoded. All the religions, you can see something of that. It's not always so obvious whose intentions are encoded into it, but it is a factor. So I think don't think about how I'm saying it, but just what I'm saying. What's the information? That's one side, and then how you're saying it is another side. But there's this fractionating discussion. This fractionated discussion we're having is right versus left. The right is like, whoa, what are we saying? What is the logic? Although logic, I think, being too logical, logic can invert on itself. There's always assumptions made from assertion to assertion. It's like the science of logic, or just the way logic works, is from each premise to conclusion. There's an assumption, or there's an assumption of what the premise is, or, you know, whatever. So I think this is actually a little bit of a weakness of the logical way of looking at things. And then on the left, it's like, well, how are they saying? And that comes into left-wing rhetoric a lot. Although I feel that the left, you know, here in Slovenia, talking to some people or looking into some things, it's not that it's like devoid of intellectual it's not devoid of some kind of intellectual drive. It's not devoid of intellectual rigor. It's just it's a little more exploratory, I think. I think sometimes there's a little bit of an impetuous idea that the exploration, instead of exploration being exploration and maybe experimentation, it's like, no, the communism's inevitable. The Marxist state is inevitable. Oh, it didn't work the last few times, but it's coming. The world's gonna change. Just wait a little bit. Whereas, Marx is already wrong about that shit. And honestly, I think there's some maliciousness encoded in Marxist words. So, like, for me, I've said this a few times in private, but I think communism is the new modern thing, is viable. But I think we have to get rid of Marx. I think Marx is too ideological. It's like a religion, basically. And yeah, I just don't think anyone actually wants that. I mean, people defend it like it's a religion. That's what I'm talking about. Is it literally a spiritual tradition? No. But it almost galvanizes people as a religion does. And I think people have this idea that we're not really galvanized by religions anymore, we're not energized by religion. And there's an element of like, the soul has gone out of the world and people are thinking more about profit and things, but still the person who is religious is going to be galvanized in a way that realistically the person who is not is never gonna catch up to. Like, that's why, in my opinion, I think the world doesn't make any sense if you don't think about secret society. A world where you're living in this little village where things work in this earthly way, but somewhere in some corporate office, something's happening that's totally alien and totally, and that's just how it is type of thing. I don't think so. Like the materialistic politics of cause and effect. So, but that's the thing, that people in these offices are people. They're, and people aren't that rational. Even the sort of logic mongers aren't. I would say logic and rationality is in itself not that rational when you consider the chaotic nature of life. There's just how many variables that you can't really think of. That was a big bet I made, and I would say it paid off. But you have a lot of people talking about the politics, and I think there's just another side of it that is the operative controlling side of it. I don't think everything boils down to like, complicated geopolitics. I think, sure, I'm not saying politics and culture war and all these things are fake. To some extent, I think they are, but I think it's complicated. But I think the deciding element is like secret societies and Hillary Clinton looking for the Lazarus Pit, supposedly, according to one friend. I'm a little bit sus on that point because the Lazarus Pit's from Batman, but supposedly it's a real thing that Gilgamesh had. I mean, they base these things off of real mythology sometimes, so perhaps. But yeah, apparently it's in the Epstein files somewhere. I'm not gonna look at the Epstein files. I'm not gonna read through them. Frankly, I don't care. I think, I think we live in a time that's so nasty and predatory that, if you have a loved one, why are you letting them go out alone? Why are you letting them, we're at a time that's dangerous like that. Then again, if you're just kind of smart, you'll be alright. But I think the people that get harmed by a lot of this stuff are people that just, they're the person that wants to see the good in the world and just ignore the bad, and then, you know, that can actually have the effect of drawing in the bad. So, then again, we are in, like, for someone like me who is sort of mildly against the system, I used to be incredibly antagonistic towards, you know, quote unquote, the system. And yeah, I got gang stalked basically, pretty badly too. Like, it wasn't like, oh, you know, someone's over there like snapping pictures of me. No one's ever gonna believe this. It was much worse than that. They did all kinds of. When I was in US, they did all kinds of really sophisticated intimidation tactics and things, and it just made me more and more upset and hate the system more and manifest against the system more. And yeah, and now here I am, and I don't really care anymore. I think the people that get hurt by the system, maybe like, I guess I would like to kind of know some stories of how people get sucked up into this stuff, or you know, apparently there's missing children in the U.S. Like, I know it's a hard thing because, you know, as a parent, it would be more positive if you could just let your kids like go out and play and not really worry about it. But yeah, you can't always do that. Anyways, back to my my whole throwing up treasures in heaven, or to whom who is given a little and acts faithfully, more will be given. You know, so I see it as that we should do the best that we can in our life as it is now to try and make it more, you know, harmonious, and the thing is, the world is God's creation too, so it's not like the world. Okay, there's Jesus says some things that the world is like evil or whatever, or that the prince and power of the air is Lucifer, but the world is still God's creation, so I think we should see it more as like a microcosm of what will come next, or maybe not a microcosm, but like a mirror of what will come next. So I think people have this idea that in the Protestant faith that they can put everything off till the next time, till the next life, and you know, not really feel the need to live mindfully in the now. And I don't think so. I think that we have to manage, you know, be stewards of this world now, and then being good stewards here will be rewarded later, perhaps. I mean, I'm just gonna say I don't think it makes any sense. I don't think it makes any sense that, you know, someone's poor, has some resentments stored up, their kids are a little bit estranged from them, still Christians or something, but estranged, and there's some narcissism of little differences, beef between parent and child. You know, I mean, I went off to do something spiritual, so I disconnected from my family, and this is just part of the spiritual path for me. I'm not complaining about my scenario, and socially speaking, I guess I did wrong, but I mean, spiritually speaking, I did right, but you know, so I feel a lot of people are, you know, like I've seen this in the Protestant faith a lot, where people are putting a lot of pressure on their children to be keeping their way straight, and you know, kind of picking at their kids over every little thing, because they pick at themselves over every little thing, because, you know, they want to be like a good little Christian or whatever. And there's a little bit of this almost tyrannical energy that comes with it, of like needing to control each other into being better people or something. But it's like socially better. It's like being a nicer person, being a nice guy, and I just don't think that's as valuable as some people seem to think. You know, but yeah, if people are poor, having resentment, basically just spineless rule followers, petty, cliquey, you know, and all the things I'm saying is like most Protestant Christians, and perhaps most Catholics. Catholicism is a different vibe, and I haven't been around it enough. I would say I found it more positive from what I have seen, but I also find it more superficial, which also I find it a good thing. So, you know, sometimes there's other areas of life, and giving attention to those areas of life as they are instead of trying to make everything about like Jesus, you know. I mean, perhaps Jesus should be in everything you do, in a picture of everything you do, but sometimes you go to work and you do your work and you bring Jesus internally, but you don't bring Jesus externally. It's not, you know, this is a big thing in magic too, is like if you're always worried about like how to do something with some deity or how to do something with some, you know, you're just squeezing the deity. And I think a lot of people are squeezing Jesus instead of trusting the process and saying, okay, I'm with Jesus, okay, what next? What happens next? There's a lot of judgment because of like the social expectations of being a Protestant Christian. Yeah, so I just find a lot of things illogical, and illogical, irrational, and with the dogma, there's no. Yeah, I find it illogical and irrational in the sense that where are the variables? Like, life is full of variables, but the spirit world isn't. Okay, I've seen through my occult practice that there's some rules, but still, it's like, yeah, the dogma, it's not big enough, and people think that they're being a good image of Jesus while, and when I said poor, there's a lot of poor Christians, like especially in the South. There's more of there's a lot more of like middle class people though, in like where I was from, in church, and it was like they almost had to give some. Sometimes there's this feeling of having to give some excuse of, oh, why am I rich and someone else poor, even though middle class people are not rich. They're actually, in some sense, I guess I wouldn't call them poor, but they're certainly, I think most people aren't even affluent, but they're just living a normal life. It's getting more and more expensive to the point where more and more people are poor, and there's like a guilt about that. And, you know, perhaps rightfully so, like, oh, if I'm not this perfect, you know, cookie cutter person, then I guess I'm out on the street or something. It can be like that in some places. So, you know. But this is what I'm talking about storing up treasures in heaven. Is like, are you really storing up treasures in heaven by being a spineless rule follower, a cliquey spineless rule follower? No, you're not. I'm gonna spoil it. No, you're not. I mean, if you have a really nice clique and it's like it's your soul tribe, it's your squad, it's you know, whatever cringe thing to call it. Sure, you know, okay, like there's nothing wrong with having friends and being focused on your friends. I think everyone should try and be welcoming to others and see all men as brothers to some extent, to some very small extent. I only call very few people brothers, but like I'm being metaphorical here. But you know, okay, that's not such a big deal. But being a spineless rule follower, are you following rules because of, you know, social things, or do you understand and you're trying to create the best result? And, you know, so I think this is something where people just haven't thought a lot about it, or they haven't thought right about it, and I think that's kind of hilarious, honestly. But yeah, so if you're not building up the people around you, if you've not developed a little bit of the Christ aura, as it were, like I've seen Christians that have had it and it's very impressive, but I mean, I read the book of Acts and I think everyone had it once upon a time, and then it's really believable that they just lay on the hands and someone would be healed. The Mormons do that. What's going on, Protestants, you know? Like, okay, some Protestant churches do some of the more magical things and make it work, but no, this is why I really respect the Mormon Church, and I look forward to going back one day. There's too much now. There's too much going on now. There's too many issues, but you know, I'd like to be a part of it again, you know, because they do the real thing, you know, and there's problematic elements. Honestly, the whole thing about them being manipulative, their manipulations are so completely transparent that I don't even consider them manipulations. It's just, hey, you're gonna do what I said, right? You know, and they're really, really nice about it, but they want you to do what they want you to do, basically, and they will manipulate you, but the manipulation is completely transparent. So if you go in like, oh, this is the real faith, then I guess you'll get manipulated. But yeah, I mean, if you have your brain turned on whatsoever, you'll see all of it, and I appreciate that. I would rather see it coming and know exactly what they're doing, and then almost communicate directly to you what they're doing. You know, maybe not in so many words, but I don't know that much about what's going on behind the scenes of it, but they're really not hiding their intentions that much. And you know, if someone has some intention, but as an organization, the intentions are always quite clear towards you as a person. And you know, okay, I have some ability of discernment to see these things, but you know, if you go to, you know, even in the Protestant church, if someone is keeping their cards close to their chest and just not telling you things, discernment can give you the vibe check of like, maybe there's something going on behind the scenes here, but it's never going to be so transparent. With the Mormons, it's totally transparent. Not to mention, the Mormon faith, Christianity is always, you know, it has the church service is an invocation. There's some slight magic to it, and I think it was always intended that way. But the Mormon faith is far more magical and brings in some interesting facets from Freemasonry. Yeah, so you know, I was impressed, honestly. And I think those people are building something up for heaven. They focus on building their personal wealth. They are actually relatively willing to share their wealth. Okay, they built a big mall in Salt Lake City, whatever. You know, they're not going to give wealth. They're not going to share with people that aren't going to, you know, it's not going to help them spiritually. They seem to really genuinely care. I have heard some things about some, like, you know, some children getting hurt or whatever. I don't know. I hadn't really noticed anything like that. I of course had a bit of a fear of it because of, you know, just conspiracy theory type stuff. But you know, there's bad actors everywhere. So I don't know. I don't know exactly what to look for in that sort of thing. But I think also it's the point where everything that's not Protestant Christianity is called like an elitist pedo cult by you know, internet conspiracy theorists or Christian conspiracy theorists, and it's like, okay, you know, even though the Protestant church has its own share of well, it's so decentralized that you almost can't tie it down and say anything about it, because it's just, the denominations are really loose. There's not really a clear power structure in any of them. Like, the denomination picks the pastor for the church, and then that's it. You know, they and a lot of denominations. So I think that banner of protection on the Protestant church is really not saying much, or that decentralization. I don't know if it's actually a good thing. I know plenty of Protestant thought leaders, Protestant preachers that, oh, you know, he's been fucking the secretary, he's been, you know, whatever, and you know, some sexual indiscretion. So yeah, it's not like somehow the Protestant church is better in that way. I think I mean, maybe in some ways, but I think maybe also because there's no like, with a Protestant church, you're not connected to a bigger thing. You're connected to the denomination, but not really. No one thinks about the denomination. Because of that, I think there's not really this idea of you don't feel like it hurts your faith. I think, like, it's not the same devastating blow when, you know, your pastor or another pastor you know of has some sexual indiscretion or some indiscretion of some other sort, I guess, or you know, I think also you don't vest feelings of protection into the. You don't feel like, oh, this is this organization, this ism, this whole ideology is Christ's domain on the earth, like in the Mormon Church or the Catholic Church, or some of these some other groups. And because that confidence isn't vested in it, sort of that really it's what's it called? Superstitious. It's basically the same thing as superstition in my mind. It's magical thinking, but I think people become too comfortable because of that, and then they don't want to take precautions. And this isn't. I don't mean to like blame victims or anything, but I think just in general, that's the reason. If the Protestant Church actually does have less pedos in leadership positions, that would be why. The other thing is the Protestant churches also don't have a lot of leadership a lot of the time. But I think mega churches sometimes will have things going on like this too. So I think maybe as soon as there's a big power structure, the opportunities for abusing children are there. But does that mean that we should bulk against having power structures or having real organizations that wield some kind of actual influence in society? I mean, shouldn't we try and get the biggest stake at the table that we can to be stewards of this earth? I mean, if powerlessness is some kind of virtue, it's, being meek is a beatitude, not powerlessness. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I think there's just a lot of disingenuous. A lot of it's disingenuous. This idea that, oh, it's all spiritual. It's all for the next life, and yeah, I don't think so. So, through that, I'm really I am throwing a question. What I feel is quite a devastating question at every sect of Christianity, or almost every sect of Christianity, at Vaishnavism, at some branches of Shaivism, at at Islam, it's just probably a lot of faiths that I'm not as familiar with as well. Of Gnosticism also. Gnosticism in the esoteric space, there's a lot of people have gotten this idea that we're in this projection false reality, and that we can just wake up and be in a better, higher reality, that this one is like a distorted reflection of, which I also don't take seriously. I mean, perhaps there's a higher reality, but I think once again it's a psychological device. It makes people foreclose on the present and everything's about some wonderland that they don't actually have an experience of. I think that's incredibly dangerous. Of course, my stance on this is that I'm more tantric, that the weaving of spirit into the matter, into the flesh, into the current reality, and to say that the current reality simply is spiritual. It is. I look at a tree. This tree is filled with spirit. It's this idea that no, that tree I'm looking at now is evil. It's a creation of some demonic god, or it's a corrupted creation that's corrupted to the point that it's nothing. It's like an asset in a video game. It doesn't matter. I disagree. I think no, that tree is spirit. Um, the spirit is now. The kingdom of heaven is the kingdom of heaven. Okay, when I say the kingdom of heaven, then that invokes something different. But to continue this metaphor, I'll say the kingdom of heaven is here. This is heaven. Heaven is the reality in which this reality is subsumed. So that goes through a lot of my questions about Christianity, and through Christianity, my intention here is to protract that onto all the religions, because I think a lot of these habits come up in a lot of religions. I mean, it was shocking to me in listening to my ex talk about ISKCON, being there for a few occasions. There's some ways of looking at things, like it's window dressed, very Eastern. But there's some ways of thinking of things that are very, very Christian, very a much more Western way of looking at it. So I guess my point is, and my overarching point here is to talk about the multidimensional. The multidimensional nature of this work, of this magical work, of this magical life. Not just of my magical life, but, I think this is a typical magician's outlook, to some extent. I mean, this is the great work. This is the great work of the philosophy and the magic and the spirit of it, even the religion of it, to stretch that word more into its Eastern or philosophical context, perhaps. Religion is kind of a loaded word, is the thing. I think ultimately religion can refer to, all wide variety of things, but the way we think of religion, I'm not talking about religion in that sense, but just what drives us, and what do we find, sort of a kind of redemption, a redemption of the time, a present redemption, or what is the meaning of this? What is ultimate in this? So yeah, I think hitting on religions is hitting on what is the handshake between religion and magic, between or more so between religion and esoterics, like exoteric religion and esoteric mysticism and occult, that which is occult, that which is hidden, that which is secretly vested inside the matter. And that explains a lot of what the intrinsic point is here, is that, and I'll say that now I'm going to go on to Rosicrucians, but I think some more explanation is owed here. I think in my mind I've explained it, but I don't think I've explained it completely. The outer look of the religion is hiding something that we need to find, is hiding something that's consciousness. Okay, perhaps Jesus is coming and is going to kill all the sinners or something, and bring the faithful into heaven. Maybe that'll happen. I don't know, but I think the Bible or the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam, or all these texts, the Quran. There's a certain ethereal reality to it. There's a certain metaphysical thing behind it that's what this esoterics is about, and from that naturally arises magic. It naturally arises the ability to manipulate these things because you simply know the nature. What's the difference between someone who knows how money works and someone who doesn't, right? That's what I'm saying. To be once again a metaphor, the exoterically religious person is someone focused on money but doesn't understand how it works. The esoteric person understands, the covenant between the individual and the state that the money represents. They understand the covenants between each other, the relationships that money changing hands represents, and all of these things. You know, so because there's a lot more to it. It's not just, oh, okay, I have $5 in my hands. It's like, no, this is currency. This is the current of this is the current of the nation. This is the current of, you know, the resources in the nation. And to look at money like that, I mean, I don't know. I'll admit I don't know as much about money as I'd like, or understand it as well as I'd like. But I understand that rich people, the way they view money is a lot more like magical. I don't completely understand it. It's not so much my area of focus, but I think it's a good metaphor for. It's the same with religion. You know, you look at religion for what it is on its face. It's like, oh, I have $5 in my hands. Well, actually, not really. You know, you see the icon in your hand. You don't understand the current it represents. So, yeah, I think by saying that, I think this I'll just leave to some interpretation on, you know, the part of the listener. I think my powers of explaining it have run out, and at some point, you know, it's just you kind of just have to come to the point where you come to that place of knowing what this all means, or understanding kind of what this kind of speak is, you know, what the point is. At some point you have to get there for yourself. I don't know how to explain even simpler than what I have, and I don't think I should have to. I think that you know, that's as basic as it can get before I'm just teaching basic arithmetic, you know. So now I'm going to move on to the Rosicrucians, and it kind of dispensed with. I'm going to take one step up. I'm going to go one step more advanced, and I'm going to talk about. Okay, so there's a metaphorical meaning behind this, but does that mean it's not? Does that mean that there's also a physical meaning, that the metaphorical meaning is vested within, or is it that the texts of these religions and things are only trying to convey something metaphorical and metaphysical and esoteric? And I'm going to talk about the Rosicrucians in this way because I think some people genuinely believe this sort of thing I'm going to speak of, but I think there's also a lot of obfuscation and secret society people trying to get people, trying to shut people up with this more, what they consider a more esoteric view of it, of, oh, these texts are only trying to get at these more metaphorical meanings, which is actually it's actually totally materialistic, because it almost turns these esoteric and magical things into, okay, this is just a symbology of like psychology or something. Yeah, I don't like. Okay, all of the demons of the Goetia are you and your subconscious. The angels, and angel magic of, like, you know, Raphael, Gabriel, Michael, Michael, Nil, you know, etc., 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 are also facets of you. I don't believe that. I believe that perhaps there's some overlap between one's persona and these personas. Perhaps. Actually, no. I think maybe there's a connection, but that gets a lot into some ideas in Rosicrucianism that I've come across with, like amorph Rosicrucians on the internet. But I think it's an important thing to talk about, because a lot of people have come onto this delusion that, oh, all these things are just, you know, live life, be a good person, view all religions as the same. And it's like, no, religions aren't the same. Each religion is a code, and that code produces, you know, its own manifestations, basically. And to say that, oh, all that's the same, it's all trying to get at the same spiritual truth. No, not really. In fact, in the Fama Fraternitas, the original manifesto of the Rosicrucians, it talks about how Christian Rosenkreuz went to these different countries and said, oh, they have some of the truth, but not all of it. They're wrong on some things. Oh, so there is a difference, and there is a correct or incorrect condition here. Very interesting. But yeah, I'll continue with that. Okay, continuing from the last Rosicrucians. So here I'm gonna pause and I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm actually sort of doing here. And so my point isn't just to rant about things and you know, loosely related. What I'm trying to do is I'm using my experience to sort of tackle some of the ideas that I've come across that you know, I don't think I've come across everything, but I think I've come across a flavor of everything. And so I think I can just parse through that through my experience. And then it can be wealthier for being married to my experience because, you know, I've actually experienced it and dealt with it and argued with these people. You know, in a very respectful, well, I'm respectful if they're respectful. or rather, I respect their desire to create a more adversarial, performative type of, you know, duel of insults or something. It can be fun. I don't have such resistance to it. I don't say, oh, you know, typical Redditors on my back. I just say, oh, okay, guess it's time to have some fun. Yeah, with this thing. And but I'm not attached to it, and I think that'll. Some of the people I've talked to, even though I think some of them perhaps were spooks, were, yeah, okay, using the word a bit loosely here, but agents. You know, they're acting as an agent of some ideology, at least, were very attached to what they're saying. If I'm wrong, I'm just gonna say, oh shit, I was wrong, and, you know. But the thing is, I'm a shitty person where I can, like, I'm always gonna think about, okay, what's the premises of this? I can just keep asking what's the premises until it inevitably folds in on itself. And that's like the most it's like the most grinding way to win. Grinding. It's the most sure way to like win if that's the scenario, because it's like, well, you're so sure about it, but how do you know, right? And I can just say, well, how do you know? Well, how do you know that? Well, how do you know that? Well, how do you know that? And eventually it's like, oh, well, I made an assumption. Well, or I think I heard this one time, most of what people know, they know because it's like, well, I assumed it, or you know, someone told me it was that way. I think that's very true. And you can just keep asking questions, kind of the Socratic way of doing dialogue, and eventually just evaporate the enemy's argument. I don't do this in person because I think in person the ad hominems can be a lot worse, and it kind of is more like the energy of the onlookers and their thing. I guess I will even go so far to say is I don't respect people enough to really bring these things up in person. In person I'll just be really agreeable and, like, you know, oh, okay, that's interesting. And, you know, I might use some subtle ways to be kind of savage, but you know, not that I'm afraid of what people think, but my question is always, what's the good here? How can I do good? Because if I have something posted up on the internet, theoretically infinite people could see it, probably, you know. But I've had it happen where years after the fact someone sees something that I wrote. Well, I think it's happened once or twice years after the fact. I've become more casual about content because, you know, it hasn't really happened enough that people went through my wall for me to, you know, to take it seriously. And typically the type of people who do go through my wall are obsessive, sick people that are not really, you know, useful to me. It's not doing anything for them to see something I wrote earlier, right? I've thought of ways to get around this, or different, you know, different ways of distributing content, or what if I make an ebook or something, or anyways. But if I say something in person, it's just the people around, and so there's a lot more context. There's a lot more loaded context. There's a lot more of people just think things that aren't correct, and like it's actually not really that viable to get in someone's face and just ask a bunch of questions. And I think this, I think it was Plato in the Symposium. Julian was just telling me about this, that Aristophanes is like, nobody likes you because of the way that you talk like this. And yeah, I think the loss of, nobody really likes you when you're a certain way. I think that doing that socially is so costly and it causes so many problems downstream that it's just not worth it. And for what? For some moron who doesn't know anything to hopefully get some mud on their face that will cause them to reflect. It's not worth it. And let's say people have quite a high regard for me in some circle of friends or something, or wherever I happen to be. Okay, I was talking about church earlier. Let's say I'm at church and I'm right about something and I have a lot of information about it. Let's say for sure I'm right. In life, really, maybe you're right, maybe you're 70% right, but I think there's an element of mystery there where it's not so clear. It's a little more ambiguous. Who's right and who's wrong on an ultimate scale. And a lot of times I think people become the voices of certain spirits. But let's just say, for conversation's sake, you're at church, or if someone's very adverse to church, maybe we could say you're discussing politics and one person is 100%, you're 100% right, the other person's 100% wrong. Some people are a little more sympathetic to your way of looking at things, some people are more sympathetic to the way they're looking at things. The more you work to illustrate how the other person is wrong, and the more obviously they're wrong, the harder it is to show that to them with dignity. And the more that they're going to go into ad hominems or bad argumentation or whatever, the more it, even just simply saying the truth, socially feels like you're grabbing someone by the hair and shoving their face into the mud. And and that's if people actually respect you and respect your opinion, respect your voice. And let's face it, most of the time you're just a body at church, you're just a body at the organization, you're just a body at work, and there's social hierarchy and things of that nature. I just think it does no good to have no respect for that. I think a lot of the things are artificial, and we collectively need to realize that a lot of these things are artificial and be a little bit more open to each other's ideas and things, and learn how to talk with each other and be more intellectual, I think, in a very honest way, in a way that's like, oh, I was wrong, oh shit, when you're right, I guess, that's all it has to be. Nobody's walking around on the earth right about every single topic, so I think there's a lot of hubris in this, and there's a lot of there's a lot of people walking around that they have a point about something and they won't shut up about it, and they're not really as smart as they seem to think. And I'm gonna say I don't have that deep desire. I don't have that deep caring for others that I need them to know what I know. At this point, I don't need that anymore. I haven't needed it for a long time. But I'm more successful in spreading my ideas now. My ideas are very niche. I mean, even the topic is very niche. So actually, I think compared to how niche what I'm working on is, I feel my success is completely explosive. I mean, I have 50 subscribers, and I have, I get some, engagement on my posts. And, I think, of course, a lot of people look and read but don't like or show that they read, which They should, because then I would at least know that, even if it's bad, that I would at least know that someone read it, and you know that I would have information about it. So instead, I just think I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I want, and you know, whatever comes of that. So because of the lack of engagement, because people don't vote with their engagement, but I think I'd rather them not. I think I'm not that interested in what people. I'm interested in what a very few amount of people have to say, and you know, then I have a Facebook group for that, for which I, you know, at one point was aggressively searching for people to enter it and be a part of it. I guess I wish some of the members would bring in people they know, but perhaps they don't know anyone that would fit in nicely. Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, but all in all, that's success for. I'm into esoterics and occult, not spirituality. Spirituality is already niche. This esoterics part, this non-Masonic esoterics, and it's not even really non-Masonic. It's like sort of para to para-Masonic. It's para-Masonic. It's double para-Masonic information, lol. Something like that, or para-Kabbalistic, or it's more like, actually, if I say parathelemic, that describes it pretty well. or just generally Crowleyan, which is just incredibly niche. And it doesn't only appeal to such people, but it's like an array of very niche groups, and it's yeah, it's just incredibly niche. So but yeah, I think the internet's a wonderful opportunity to spread ideas quickly, and for someone else to iterate off of them. I've had what I feel is great success in that too. I have a few friends that me and them, we speak and we change each other's consciousness. We you know, share the truth that we each other hold, and we are each stronger for it as our iron sharpens iron. I mean, I especially have, I'm going to say 3 friends like that, whom I consider to be more or less equals. You know, it's kind of hard to, I would say, yeah, to say they're equals is the safest, to just consider it that way. I mean, on this niche thing, that's incredible. So I guess when I'm on one hand giving a note of appreciation for my own work, and saying yes, this has worked. And I think it's important to take time to, you know, appreciate when something has worked. I think so often we focus on problems and solving problems, but if we don't take the time to appreciate and say, okay, this was good, that's working, that's going the right direction, you just always end up fighting the wrong direction and going the wrong direction because you're actually just putting energy in the wrong direction. So that's the power of appreciation. And when it comes to specifying, when it comes to rejecting energies, you know, it's like a tree or a bush. You know, you cut the wild branches that aren't in the right shape, and this actually helps the bush to grow more nicely. So I think that's the mentality we need to have about shaping ourselves, shaping our lives, shaping our growth. And this is another thing about the multidimensionality of magic and this occult work, is that like this thing I'm speaking of is, you know, there's someone jerking off to sigils who's getting, you know, fuck all results. They're getting phantasmagoria and basically using magic as, you know, a narcotic to keep them in la la land. And then there's someone who lives mindfully, appreciates their life, and gets amazing results, and is living, you know, a very happy, harmonious life. that they control with their consciousness, which is the point of magic. It's the point. The point isn't to draw funny pictures and dress like a weirdo and see what else, and pray to deities. And the point, okay, the relationship with deities is one point within itself, the relationship to God even, but the point is to be a voter, be a decider in your own reality, to, the word's a bit trendy, but to co-create reality, to be in harmony with nature, and to make nature harmonize to you, to your desires. And also something I'm getting just a bit of a download. There's harmony in symphony, so that's something to think of as well. And then that's also referring to astrology of trines and squares respectively. So there's a lot to think about, but that's the point of knowing it, right? The point isn't to be like, ooh, you know, I gave an offering to Zeus, and then I, you know, the first video on my YouTube feed was also something about Zeus, or, you know, sometimes there's a lot of people that are just on the treadmill. I think there's a lot of people on the treadmill of these little manifestations that are really exciting, and that sort of delays their hunger for something else. I think it even says this in the Bible that if you see angels, like when you're praying, that you should just ignore them, because the point is the prayer. The point is, you know, the work. It's not the angels. You know, and for me, I actually, if angels visit me, I include angels. I don't know where it says that exactly. I heard that from a preacher that's like, I'm not exactly sure of, but there's a certain truth to it that all of these sort of fantastical things will come about, and it's kind of your choice to, well, I mean, what do you really want? Do you want to immerse yourself in the fantasy? And it's like, why? Life is fantastic. I mean, look at your phone, how amazing your phone is. You know, love is amazing, having children is amazing, eating is amazing, breathing is amazing. If you can't find the power and the good stuff in that, it's like, it's the same idea. If you are given a little and act faithfully in it, more will be given. And so sometimes, actually, I can talk about that directly with meditation. Like if you do karnataka, like looking at one point and focusing on it, you will, when you're on the astral plane, it's a whole different experience, and it's much higher resolution because you've trained your awareness to be steady. Because when you're on the astral plane, your awareness wants to shift all around because it's so stimulating. And that focus is just so powerful. You know, you appreciate that, you add energy into that focus, you train that focus, you're faithful in that focus, and it expands into something else. And so, and I'm using this metaphorically. I'm connecting a lot of things here, a lot of ideas that I'm doing so somewhat artistically. It's not, you know, dogmatically or doctrinally correct in some cases, but I think that there is a certain deeper truth that here, or a deeper array of truths that I'm attempting to artistically articulate, and you know, yeah, I feel that it's a good effort. So this is a good. I think this is the lowest dimension that's still magical. Of, you know, anyone can look at a spot on the wall for, you know, 20 minutes. Anyone can do certain exercises with their breath. You know, anyone can make the attempt to clear their mind and make it empty, although that one's, I think, much harder. but it's possible. Anyone can do these things, and it's not necessary to be like, I mean, these things lend towards this spiritual anyways. Like, if you do these practices, the spiritual will just show up in your face, because through prana, through breathing, you are actuating spiritual energies through the breath, which is spiritual. And that's, once you understand that, you understand how obtuse and these things are, how steep it is, how it's complicated and sort of beyond human understanding, or mundane human understanding. And yeah, it's not necessary to start with, you know, wizard with stars on the hat, or you know, aliens, or, you know, mythical beasts or something, or gods. Like, that would be the place I would recommend anyone to start, is that very basic thing. But no one's gonna start there because it's hard, and, you know, yeah, it's not the immediate, like, dopamine hit or something. It's not the immediate fantastical narcotic of, like, oh, look, I'm special. Oh, happy me, nice, good. You know, I knew I was special. And the terrible thing is, a lot of people that get into this stuff, they are, but they stop at, I'm special, I knew it. Because, you know, the world works so hard to tell us we're not special. And I suppose everyone's special in their own way. Everyone has an interesting path, or has some work ahead of them. Or at least I'd like to think so. Maybe not the young Earth souls. I don't know. Yeah, maybe not then. Now that I think of it. I mean, I do have, like, for me, I had no choice. I had to start on the work, or it would have killed me. But other people don't have that drive for it, or that need. So I guess it does depend a bit. But everyone has a relationship to the divine, even if they're very asleep. So maybe just put it that way. I think just through free association, practically by accident, I've happened upon probably the greatest criticism that I've yet to formulate against Rosicrucians, internet Rosicrucians, the amorc, internet foot soldiers, the internet trolls, which happen to all either be Rosicrucians stated plainly on their bio, or their argumentation will sound a lot like that. So it's questionable how many of them actually are not part of some similar group, or finding themselves to similar teachings. I mean, my guess is they're all just Rosicrucians. I had some idea that maybe they were coordinating some kind of basically cyber gang stalking against me, or cyber bullying against me, and I didn't care much. I think that their ideas I think their rhetoric is completely retarded, and is completely annihilated by any kind of real esoteric learning combined with experience. And I mean, because they're just saying, like, oh, mystical experiences, you're missing the point. It's like an obtuse consciousness thing, right? Oh, so why would you go to, like, I think it's so much harder to defend that these things were encoded as demons and things like that supposedly people saw, that Roger Bacon was said to have summoned in many stories that are more like folk tales than legend. You know, what was the metaphor of the tales of Roger Bacon summoning demons and making people float and things? And then fast forward to Aleister Crowley and the one Sufi mystic having a competition of levitating some dude, which I suppose, I mean, it's believable to me they actually managed to physically levitate a man. You know, Crowley coming from the Golden Dawn, which was basically a Rosicrucian order. Well, at least it was established by two Rosicrucians from the SRIA, which is like big boy Rosicrucians, as far as I can tell. You know, so I think it creates far more questions to say that it's all an obtuse metaphor that has no, it's not truly magical, or rather to say it's magical, they don't mean by magical what I mean by magical or what Crowley meant by magical. That magic is like, you know, okay, I'm going to know my path and balance my internal urges and things, and that's kind of where it ends. That's what I could deduce from what they said. I mean, you have people scoffing at me about astral projection and telling me about morality. Once you reach enlightenment, you realize morality is basically fake. I think that morality is still in harmony with, like, you know, certain cosmic laws, so it's not entirely fake. But when you reach enlightenment, you realize that, well, okay, it's not fake, but it was made up by someone, and it's not absolute. Because when you you can reach a point of enlightenment where you're entirely immune to karma. So, I don't know if it's necessarily totally useful to be there, but I think it becomes more complicated to manifest from there, and like you're kind of always going to, you'll be like a fringe case. I think that's the impression I've gotten from cases like this that I've seen. You're not a player in the game then, because the game is karma, and if you are outside of karma, you're outside of the game. So, you know, there's that. But you can get to the, like, this is why there's a lot of gurus that abuse people, because, you know, it's not that hard for someone to unhinge themselves from karma, and then they can kind of do what they please with minimal fear of karmic reaction. You know, they'll have worked, you know, 30 cult members to death on their cult farm, and, you know, abused many women, and then finally the government will be like, oh, this is a problem, and these people have gotten hurt, and we as the government have a duty to protect our citizens, ergo we're going to shut down this cult, you know. Because then it's on a, well, you're not at the fringe anymore, so are you playing the game or aren't you? You know what I mean? So there's a lot of complexities in this scenarios, but yeah, so partially agree, partially disagree. That's one of the things I came across with the Rosicrucians, but that is a tangent. That's not really related to the topic I'm speaking of now. That doesn't really relate to the multidimensionality thing, or I guess it does, but truly tangentially. Anyways, so the Rosicrucians, the Amorc, internet foot soldiers, it's a little bit not as fresh in my memory now, because it was some months ago that they were criticizing me and making fun of me about, you know, me speaking of aliens and spirits and things, and I think most people that speak of these things are just insane, or they're driven insane by the experience, because one can get, like, catch magical madness from doing these things. It's very particular madness. It's not really the same as, like, you know, someone with, like, schizophrenia or something. It's more focused, but I wonder if schizophrenics are people who fell down the trap of magical madness in past lives. I don't know. I think it's more complicated than that, though. So, and that way I will concede that perhaps in most cases someone saying the things that I said, that they would be right about such a person. That someone would say the right things, but not really have any idea that they're saying the right things. They're just talkers. They're just blah 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 blah, saying random things, and it's maybe more relevant or potent to someone else. They're not going to be able to realize that themselves, and they're not even going to be able to mentally realize what the import of any of it is. I say things like that too sometimes. I think it's good to be have one foot in the chaos, so that way I can channel it into order. And, you know, there's things that I say that probably hold import I don't understand. I have this shamanic, maybe somewhat schizophrenic way, but I harmonize it with mind, with, you know, I turn it into something. And I think that it's more powerful for me to do magic through art, and I'm doing that now. To express it through art than just telling like this, although I want to do both. So what the Rosicrucians were telling me, first of all, they were really upset, like 3-4 different ones that were criticizing me on Facebook, they were very upset about my interest in Crowley, and the reason for this is because he spilled some of their secrets way back when, and they don't like it. They said he was putting out blinds, and from 3 or 4 different people, I got 3-4 different explanations of what's meant by blinds, what this criticism actually means, even though in this same statement of, oh, Crowley was putting out blinds, one person sent me excerpts of like 2 different Rosicrucian handbooks and a Martinist handbook, saying that, oh, Crowley's putting out blinds. Anyone who associates with Crowley or speaks of Crowley is not to be let in on these things, or something like that. I forget the exact wording. And yeah, I asked, what are these blinds? I asked over and over again to like 3-4 different people, and the answers kept being confusing and different. So that already makes me call bullshit. So every Amorc Rosicrucian policing these occult Facebook groups is having the same animosity against Crowley, and saying the same exact things about blinds, but then they're giving me different explanations. Perhaps there's some the truth here is multidimensional as well. But the thing is, whenever I've been directed towards Rosicrucian internet mystery schools or books or teachings in general, it's always learn the Tree of Life, learn the Hebrew alphabet. It's a lot of learning. I think from this learning and the meditation over some of these topics, out of that crystallizes some gold. And it's like you can take it metaphorically and more psychologically, more as a psychological or psychoanalytical type truth, or perhaps then some magical possibilities can come out of that. That seemed to be what they were getting at. And I talked to a few of these people at some length, so it's not like a couple of 2-3 sentence comments. I'm extrapolating all of this. I'm extrapolating a bit just because they were so evasive, and I think, yeah, I'm inclined to distrust on this point because I got up on the astral plane and hit one of these people who was particularly degrading, and I believe he also called me a pedo, which of course, it didn't scare me in the least, and it felt disingenuous, and it also created a situation where it made me impervious to criticism, even going into the future, because once you're called, basically one of the worst possible things you can be called in my mind, over something that's really didn't warrant it, it just kind of feels like, well, shit, I guess people have their opinions. It really caused me to just harden myself more and be like, fuck these retards, they don't know shit. Yeah, they're just willing to, they have no interest, many people on the internet have no interest in being intellectually honest or engaging in real discussion. They just want to throw a quick zinger, and and then I'll throw some offensive magic onto them because their zinger was offensive, is acting as evil eye, and so I will return in kind. And when I do it, it'll hurt. This is one of my specialties, and I love doing it. I love doing it. I love drinking that precious life force from the weak, retarded, poor magicians. Weak, so weak. And I extract the precious life force from them, and who knows what harm it causes in their life going forward. I suppose I've changed the trajectory of people's lives this way, and I hope that they come under the worst damage because they have tried to take me off of the road of truth, and they've tried to delude me, they've tried to delude others, they've muddied the face of truth, and that can't be tolerated. I mean, I'm a devotee of Shiva, and it's Shiva's job to, he is the destroyer, and when the demons are too demonic, when the demons are doing too much nonsense, he goes and he kills them. And when the gods are doing too much nonsense, when they're getting arrogant, he goes and he punishes them, or possibly even kills them. Or Kali Ma as well. I worship Kali Ma as well. Kali kills gods and demons alike and thinks nothing of it. And I've seen this as my divine path, and it's manifested in that way many times. So, you know, I'm not interested in this happy clappy kumbaya nonsense where we're all on the same road when we're obviously not, and I'm happy to rip anyone apart that gets in my way on this ethereal level, because someone gets in my way on a physical level, but actually there's a spirit behind them. I'll rip apart the spirit, not them. But when someone comes against me on this plane, I'm going to rip them apart as much as I can, because it's almost karmically bad for me if I don't. So that's my notion about this. And let me go biblical about this. It says in the Bible, it says put on the armor of God, wield the sword of the Spirit. It talks about spiritual warfare. We're in a spiritual war. We war against princes and principalities, not men. That's what I'm doing. You know, that I'm following the scriptures. It's an esoteric read of it, sure, but I'm doing it. And I believe that those that don't take on this war are, you know, they're guilty of spiritual sloth. I'm not saying everyone has to pick up offensive magic, but at the very least, this view of it, praying, putting their prayers in this direction, realizing that this is the war. And I think people neglect that far too much. Continuing from the last, yeah, so I felt that a lot of this activity was disingenuous, and it proved to me to be so, because, like, I think I mentioned it already, I got on the astral plane and I hit one of these people. Yeah, I said that. I hit one of these people. It was especially degrading. And what do you know? No more amorph assholes in my comments. That's really interesting. Because I hit one and then I felt others, because I got on the astral plane and I saw this person, and, you know, I did my thing. They really weren't doing anything all that special. They're pretty squishy, to put it that way. Like it's a video game, and the astral plane does feel like a video game. It's literally the mind, you know, is at work there. It's the mind, it's the astral body. So yeah, it plays like a video game almost. It's interesting. So this individual was very squishy. I felt that I had triggered some other beings to come pay attention to me, and I just made the snap decision. I don't want to wait for them to cause some issue in my life. If a spirit is getting triggered to watch me because I'm hitting this person, they're probably an enemy, and I felt they're connected to him like egregore of the group or something. So yeah, I went into astral combat with these things that woke up. I felt other magicians also came into it. So my conclusion from this is that these people are lying and just trying to move people from the path of truth. They're trying to confuse people off the path of truth, and quite maliciously so as well. So yeah, fuck them basically. I'm very, very happy to destroy such people. But yeah, so I got into quite a large combat on the astral plane with these people, and yeah, what do you know? No one's commenting now. Like since that time, I've had individuals come to me, but more like in a very friendly and conversational way. No one's called me a pedo since then, which is complete nonsense. First of all, as far as I understand, there's no evidence that Crowley did such things. Supposedly at the 33rd degree, it's part of the ritual, but the OTO, as far as I can see, doesn't even have a 33rd degree. I thought it only had 13 degrees, but apparently it has like 27 degrees. And they do like sodomy at like the what, 6th, 7th degree, something like that. That's part of it, which makes a lot of sense if you understand the Greek stuff. Okay, the Greeks turned to pederasty eventually as well, and he Crowley worshipped Baphomet. But it's not enough for me to say, oh yes, definitely he was a pedophile. And his whether he was or wasn't, his work speaks for itself. His work cracks open the occult. His work, like, my path would not have been possible if he hadn't done his work. It wouldn't be. This, Israel Regardie wouldn't have published his works about the Golden Dawn and such. And so many initiatory orders that are more like public today came out of the Golden Dawn. And they came out of the Golden Dawn. They are able to sort of propagate or proliferate even because of Israel Regardie's book. You know, I would say Regardie was maybe more instrumental in opening these things up than Crowley, but Regardie wouldn't have done it if it wasn't for Crowley. So, you know, in fact, this idea of opening up magic to the something, the baker, the candlestick maker, which I think is a little bit of a reference to some trades that were under masonry in the past. But I think he was also, I think, making the joke that now masonry is this, you know, posh thing that has become disconnected from the roots of the actual work. And so his idea was, I think a little piece of it was to empower the workers, the people who are actually physically doing the crafts of bricklayer, the candlestick maker, the baker, you know, the people who, you know, the baker works with fire. The baker uses fire to make the bread rise. It's, you know, there's an alchemy to that, and yet such people are ignorant of the deeper meaning of it. That's sort of disgusting, actually. And I think that was part of his point there. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but yeah, I admire Crowley. I don't truly know if he was or wasn't a pedo. I hope not. And if I find out that he was post his Enochian workings, post finishing with all of that, I can just say, well, that's post Tronzon Crowley. He was affected by the beast of the abyss, and basically perhaps even got possessed by it. He is a fallen brother, but the work he did before that was great. So, you know, I kind of have a lot of at this point I have a bit of a defensible position, I think, in admiring at least pre-Tronzon Crowley. But, you know, suppose to say post-Tronzon Crowley, we don't actually know if he did any of these things. And, you know, I've heard the comparison of him to Epstein, which I think is apt. I think it's very clever. But I think, you know, Epstein seems to be descended from a tradition that goes back to the Middle Ages, of, yeah, getting children and sacrificing them. Certainly he wasn't the first, although there are direct connections between Epstein and Crowley, and he had all of Crowley's books and seems to also have been a big Crowley admirer. But you have to understand how accessible and how direct his magical view is, his magical, I feel like teaching his magical philosophy. And that's why off of him you get Austin Osman Spare doing, you know, the formative works of chaos magic, which is totally ripping away all of the what's the word? Ripping away the facade, and it's just consciousness and results, which I think rips away too much, coming down to actual chaos magicians. But I think chaos magicians, there are some I've seen that seem to be a little bit more like they're doing something like quote unquote real. They're doing something effective. They're doing something a little bit not shitty, basically. Whereas some people are like, oh, I'm a chaos magician. I drew a sigil and something happened. And I don't know. That's more like witchcraft in my mind, or I don't know if we even really need to call that chaos magic, but that is a part of chaos magic, culturally, what it's caused. And then you have you also have Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard. You have a lot of people that came after Crowley that filled in the blanks and made good innovations. Eugen Grosch's work is based a lot on Crowley's. They used the Book of the Law, or perhaps not a lot on Crowley's, but it was somewhat based on Crowley's. It was, I think, in some ways spiritually descended from Crowley's, and I think that the Fraternitas Saturni has some of Crowley's DNA in it, like it almost kind of reminds me of like Mussolini and Hitler. Like Mussolini did his thing, and then Hitler kind of copied it, even though the comparison is, they're not quite as comparable as I think they'd appear at face value. Maybe it's a little bit like that. I mean, just to use a very known example of this kind of copying, but it's not exactly spiritually descended from the other, or it's spiritually descended in a very, very metaphorical way. That's what I'm trying to say. I guess I'm not trying to call them like villains like that or something, or I mean, there's different opinions on those figures in history anyways, but I don't like picking sides on such things. Anyways, Crowley, I think what's really special about Crowley is that he went to the East and he learned he learned from Buddhism and Tantra and things, and he brought that back with him. And I did something similar. I mean, I didn't actually go to the East, but I learned about the East. I went more East than I was to Europe instead of United States, and I learned a lot about the East, and that really helped. And I studied the Eastern stuff. I put my whole focus on the Eastern stuff. I totally abandoned, Western esotericism for Eastern esotericism and Eastern religions. And when I returned to Western esotericism, which I didn't even intend to, I just kind of came across it. Someone recommended that I get into it, and I was just like, oh, worth a try. My experiences with Eastern esotericism, mysticism, religion, really became this rocket fuel that made everything so clear whenever I was looking into into Kabbalah, Western esotericism, ceremonial magic, Gnosticism. It sort of opened everything because the Eastern traditions hold such a comprehensive record of a lot of these concepts that then it's very easy to look at the Western things that are more fragmented and just put them together. And then I can look at that through I can look at Western esotericism then through the lens of Eastern esotericism, and it can be like a full, complete thing, and it's not really even curious. And I think there's a lot of ideas in sort of like Masonic scholarly thought of like, oh, all the cultures are like doing their own thing, and it's not so, connected. And I mean, looking at the connections between like Hinduism and Judaism and seeing that they're quite similar actually, or it even maybe feels like Hinduism could have even been the seed from which the tree of Judaism grew, or the father tree or something. Whatever. I think I don't have to belabor that into a really effective metaphor. But that means like most of the cultures we actually care about believe the exact same things. In fact, you can look at like Canaanite religion, you can look at Sumerian and Babylonian religion, you can look at to some extent like Greek, like classical Greek religion, you can look at Egyptian religion, you can look at Hinduism, and even Buddhism, because Buddhism keeps all of the gods. It just says they're not the end of it. There's an all-pervading force that's bigger than these gods, and these gods are just kind of doing jobs in this play. So, which I find beautiful. So all these religions, you can actually draw a lot of threads between them, and I don't know, to me they look pretty much the same. I mean, Astarte and Durga seem like they're basically the same goddess, especially if you look at older forms of Durga. You know, so Inanna, Astarte, Ishtar, and Durga, which is also Aphrodite comes from that as well. You could also say Sekhmet is coming out of that. Probably it would be better to say Bastet is like Durga, you know, and of course Durga rides a lion, Bastet is a lion, and you could even interpret it that the Vahana of Durga is a lion, but vehicle could also mean, especially tantrically, the body. So you could see maybe Durga was like a cat person, if you want to get a little bit into like the ancient alien stuff. So maybe the Egyptian stuff is more accurate and earlier. A lot of people in the occult think Egypt came first, although there's an argument what came first, India or Egypt, which was the first, or maybe neither was first. Maybe aliens colonized both separately and had very similar ideas about things, and or maybe the same alien group, you know, colonized with. That's just a rapid speculation that actually makes a ton of sense, right? And it's not hard to look at these cultures and say, oh, this is the same, basically. I think when we get into trouble, though, is if we try and make them all exactly the same. That doesn't work because, first of all, Hinduism has a shit ton of gods. Like I can look at Moloch, and Moloch is a bull. Moloch is the bull, looks very similar to Nandi, the bull, that is the Vahana of Shiva. Okay, interesting. And then, so we could see Moloch as the composite god of Shiva and Nandi. We can look at Baal. Indra is said to wear a bull on his, or to ride a bull. So that's his Vahana. He rides the bull and he's a storm. He brings storms. I mean, that's Baal worship right there. Moloch, there's some argument on what Moloch actually is or means. I think it was a separate god just because, as far as I understand, there are real statues of a three-eyed bull. You know, a bull with a third eye, which is what Nandi looks like. So, like that's very neat. But what about Vishnu? What's the Vishnu of Babylonian religion, Sumerian religion, Greek religion, Egyptian religion? Is Osiris the Vishnu of Egyptian religion? Maybe. Does that make Isis Lakshmi? But Isis feels maybe more like a different god, because I don't think Lakshmi is as connected to fertility as all of that, or rain or things. So it becomes a little more complex to look at and to try and think about. Maybe Osiris is supposed to be like Shiva because Osiris is related to the sun. Surya is considered the sun god, and Hinduism is considered an aspect of Shiva. You know, it's not so clear. So I think it can't come together in a full loop. It doesn't work like that exactly. But yeah, a lot of these connections can be made. I would say Jehovah is simply Indra. Jehovah, Indra, Marduk, that these are all basically the same god, Baal. And of course, then there's a thing of, oh, well, Baal just means Lord. Well, yeah, but there is like a very specific tradition with Baal, which it's interesting. He controls the rain, and Baal's statue is in front of like financial institutions. Also the European Union. So the rain is giving life from the heavens to the earth, and you could see that through perhaps the financial institutions see themselves as feeding the earth with money, by controlling the money. They're controlling the flow of the money, which is Varuna is connected to Indra because Vritrasura held hostage the water supplies of the universe, and Varuna was on his team, and Indra killed Vritrasura, and then basically Varuna was then on his team. It's like Varuna was one of the spoils of war there. You could see Vritrasura as being similar to perhaps Marduk fighting Tiamat, but I get some. There's another current with Marduk versus Tiamat where it's like he's destroying the divine feminine, the chaotic divine feminine particularly. There's some connection there. I don't quite understand it, but you know, that's something that comes through to me in like downloads and such. So I guess this is the next step advanced of like how do we rectify comparing these you know, these religions, these traditions. Well, actually they're basically all the same anyways, they're just different perspectives almost. And they have different like complements, accessories such as worship of Vishnu or Zorvan or Osiris. You know, which of course is really complicated to talk about. And I think these then extra additions are quite difficult. Although one thing that's interesting is that every nature religion, all the shamanic traditions, or at least very many of them, worship like a mother nature deity that I think, like here it's Nickermana. I think they're not exactly worshiping nature. I compare that to like Shakti, which I think, I won't get into that, that's too much. I do want to circle back. I think I missed an important point. So I said that I had a devastating, or I had a very good criticism or argument against the whole front page Rosicrucian sort of psychological, psychoanalytical, metaphoric explanation of these things, and that's that you can simply do meditations and then you'll already like be more active in your dreams and be able to like interact with things in dreams and sympathetically control your reality, which is magic. I don't know if there's, I don't truly know if the physical beings exist in the sky that can like throw a fireball and incinerate someone or throw a thunderbolt and kill someone. I don't know if that exists. I don't, but I know that I can control my reality with magic. I know I can. I know I've seen it and I've seen other people do it, right? So magic works, and I've seen mild displacement of time. I've seen lots of visions. Like, there's something going on for sure. I think aliens, like, okay, when I talk about like the magical deities in the sky, I don't know if that exists exactly. I'm pretty sure it exists, but I can't say 100%. I can say 100% on aliens because I've just talked to them enough, and I was actually abducted one time and saw them in person. And yeah, it's quite a shock to the system to meet aliens because they have a different internal life force, and that is just inherently very jarring. Yeah, okay. Where else am I going with this? Yeah, and some of that's technology. I will say, just from the being able to transform my health with doing yogic things and whatnot, there's a lot of stories I've heard that are very believable, like Paramahansa, Yogananda Paramahansa talking about, being able to produce smells out of nothing, or just any number of fabulous siddhas producing food out of nothing, walking on waters. I think yogis still do that. Being able to attach to walls. I know of one Shaivist I believe he's a Shaivist, that he was in the south of India and he was able to climb walls and stuff, and it was on the news, and probably a lot of people can do that. Sleeping in the snow, getting all sorts of supernatural powers, being able to of course curse people. That's practically an industry in Mexico and parts of India. So that sort of thing is it's seriously real, and such people believe in deities and things. But You know, I will say also, according to Sri M, who was supposedly also a disciple of, what's his name? I forget the name of Yogananda's, like, it was his great master, his great grandmaster, or his great grandmaster. The second part of it is Mahavatar. I forget what the first part is, and it's thought that he's like, so this is apparently, I think this is where Kriya Yoga comes from, and this guy is thought to be the avatar of Shiva on Earth, and the dude looks exactly like the pictures of when, you know, in the UFO community when they depict Pleiadians, like when in the really old pictures, looks exactly like that. It's really interesting. You know, it raises a lot of questions. And Sri M says that they talked to Naga and went to the Naga's world and, were astral projected there, and so I suppose it's real, you know, why not? So, yeah. And I guess to give a small explanation of what I'm talking about here, some of the things I say half metaphorically. I'm not 100% sure if something is true. But I understand that thinking about it this way is powerful and gives me results. I don't need to see the proof in the pudding right in front of my face because, well, the belief in it manifests something. So, you know, and I'm always interrogating these ideas. I'm a magician. I'm in a constant state of transformation. Which, I don't know, maybe I should stop, but I have a hunger for knowledge. I have a hunger to experience the divine through knowledge. That you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And it has set me free. I am free, even, you know, wherever I am. I learned to have joy that comes from the Lord. I've had that feeling. Of course, I'm not even necessarily a theist. I don't know if God exists. I haven't seen the ultimate God above all gods, above all universes. I haven't seen that yet and known that that's what I was seeing. You know, I don't know. I saw Krishna. I don't know if he's that. I just don't know. I don't know. I'm not gonna say yes definitively. Oh, you know, religious superstition. Oh yeah, that's it. I liked Krishna. I still like Krishna. He's cool. He's great. He didn't tell me he's God above all. I'm under no I'm under no requirement from him to consider him to be the ultimate God. But I think perhaps he is. Perhaps, you know? Perhaps Shiva is. Perhaps they both are. It's not useful for me to dogmatically be like, no, Krishna is the true God. And Krishna doesn't need that from me, you know? Krishna is sufficient, whether he's God or not, he's self-sufficient, and he doesn't need me to be more sufficient within himself. He doesn't need that. He doesn't. If no one on the earth says Hare Krishna or Jai Ram, Krishna is going to survive. He, you know, I'm sure of it. I saw him on a spiritual plane. It wasn't the astral plane. I was drawn up to a spiritual plane, and I saw Krishna, and you know, and I won't talk about the details now of that vision, but you know. So yeah, quite possibly. It's even now I've done so many things and I still haven't had an experience like that. I suppose he could be the ultimate God, and that he should put some attention on me is, you know, that makes me very happy. But yeah, I mean, you don't get to truth by being dogmatic. You don't get to truth by being like, oh yeah, that happened, and I'm gonna set my whole, you know, identity on that. That doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter, you know. And I think that is the precious, very high-minded spirituality of I don't care. I'm indifferent. I'm doing what I'm doing. I am the divine. I within myself am the divine. I am sufficient. And I'm sufficient, subsumed in the sufficiency of the universe itself, and God himself, and all these things. So it's a moot point. I'm just here doing some activity. Maybe God's entertained. I hope he's entertained. I hope he's tickled to hell, or tickled as hell, you know. I hope so, you know. I try and live a life where I'm tickled as hell, you know, because I'm a microcosm of the divine, and even but it might, but you know, a fraction or you know, um, some small piece of infinity is still infinity. You can't divide infinity, or rather, there's you know, sort of a directed infinity, what is it, an infinite infinity. There's infinite infinity, so you can take a piece of infinity and it's infinite even within infinity. So, you know, and that's just how it is. So, and this is now the ultimate scale of it, and I think now this is the time to end with it. I went from the bottom of, you know, people's experience. I started at the sort of more woo-woo, fantastical side of it, and then I moved on to the just the bare bones experience of it, of like doing some meditation and realizing, oh, this stuff is real. And I started woo-woo because most people are first going to run into the woo-woo, to the crazy shit, which may or may not be true. But I mean, I think if you need it to be true, you're missing the point. But you know, I would say probably these things are true. Some of the woo-woo, some of it's just craziness, I think, or psyopsis. But yeah, then I moved on to you know, just the practices that will reveal the reality rapidly, very rapidly, and then I moved on to talking about the Rosicrucians a bit, because you know, secret societies are a fact, and you know, they do something in our world, and we should know about it. And there's a lot of things hanging around, but I think it's also a state of mind. The thing that these people are trying to delude me or they're trying to say to put me down, to take a big shit on me, is a conclusion that, you know, it's a compelling conclusion and something someone could possibly come to on their own. And I think addressing this materialistic, this esoteric materialism, or the spiritual materialism in this particular sense, is important, because it's something people are going to run into. And then moving on to talking about, okay, I talked about before, okay, it doesn't have to be about deities, but let's talk about deities in the context of comparative religion, especially. And well, really not a lot of legwork to do there, because you know, a lot of these traditions lend to being related to one another, through their deities, through their practices and things. Although, you know, things grow and change and become their own thing. That's just how it is. And then moving in from that into how it is all one, consciousness. Not that we all have are the same. I don't believe we're all like, you know, the same consciousness with different experiences, and that, and the totally non-dualistic sense. But you know, I think there's a lot of truth to the non-dual Advaita Vedanta type of way of looking at it. I just think that that's a pit stop. That's not the end. The end isn't realizing, oh, I literally don't exist. I think literally you do exist. But it's just, you know, you are a soul, you are a particular infinity, and you have your choices ahead of you as a particular infinity, and you can be a particular infinity infinitely. And I don't think we need to wipe that away. I think that's actually destructive of it, and I don't know, if I was God, I would be bored as hell of people wiping away you know, their egos. That's actually the content of what is then the content of their infinity. Yeah, okay, I guess if you wipe away the content of your infinity, things will manifest easier, and you'll get closer to like quote-unquote God mode. But I don't know, I just that's like a Barbie doll with no clothes, like, you know. It's like, oh, well, you know, she could be a doctor, but, well, she's just naked, I guess. So, you know, because she has all potential, she's like, you know, the best, I guess. I don't know, I don't think so. I think I think Barbie is special because she's the doctor, because she's a you know, I don't know, a high society woman, a scuba diver, whatever. You know, there's and metaphorically what I'm saying is there's content to what we've experienced and what we've done and what our journey is, what our true work is, and saying, oh, it doesn't matter, we're all the same consciousness. I think, I don't know why you would do that. I don't know why you would, like, at a consciousness level, kind of strip down naked and just be the same as everyone else. I mean, I guess there's no reason really not to, but if I was God, I'd be bored as hell from that shit. So, you know, that's my thought about it. Yeah, I mean, I'm in a spiritual position where I can feel that joy and not really care or be moved by like little circumstances. You know, there are spiritual high places to get to that aren't, you know, there are spiritual high places to get to that don't destroy the self, but you still get the good part. And I think there's this idea that you have to annihilate the ego, you have to annihilate the content of yourself to get these good things. I think it's easier to get these good things when you annihilate the self, but you literally don't have to do that. I don't know why I don't know why we do spiritual work in one life and then we have to like reacquire it. Like in Minecraft, you die and you drop all your shit and you have to go back and get it. I don't know why every time we die and are reincarnated, we have to go get our shit back again. It's easy, right? Like if you can get to your stuff soon enough in Minecraft, you're exactly where you were. You haven't lost anything except time. And that's a beautiful thing. And if you have the desire to return to what you were, it makes it much easier than if you're just like floating and, you know, whatever. And I think you never truly lose what you gained in another life. But there is a process of remembering, there is a process of regaining it, which loses you some time. And I don't know why that happens. I think some people also de-evolve over lifetimes, but you know, do we really all need to grow infinitely? Is that really the best thing that we all need to be doing? You know, it's more complicated than that. So I guess that's the other side of we're all one consciousness is, well, you know, this is actually the best explanation I've come up with about it to date. Because I've always felt that the Advaita Vedanta non-dual type stuff is correct, but I feel that there's something like wrong or almost a little perverse about it or poisonous about it, and I think I've hit on it now. I think I've cracked the code on this one, and I'm very happy with that in this moment. Yeah, that's why I do it. You know, stuff just comes to me in the moment. So yeah, I think that wraps it up in a bow. If you listened this long, I appreciate it, and I hope you learned a lot. Thank you.